How's it going, you guys? So in this video I want to talk a little bit about iron overload. The main reason why I want to talk about this, as I've talked about in many videos in the past, years ago, is because it's a very, very significant problem in our society. So refined foods are fortified with iron, and they have been fortified with iron since the 1940s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a long time. I might be off the mark by a couple of years, but essentially these fortified foods that are fortified with iron are likely a main contributor to a large number of chronic diseases, and many people are completely unaware of this. I mean, it's very possible that this fortified iron in our food supply could be contributing to things like diabetes, heart disease, kidney dysfunction, and even possibly many autoimmune illnesses, and most likely cancer. So if you look it up and you Google it for yourself, you'll easily find a wide variety of mainstream medical health sources that talk about this, and they explain everything that I had already mentioned here, and everything I mentioned in my previous videos about iron overload. That essentially, when you have too much iron, specifically fortified iron supplements, because they're metabolized differently than iron from food, what happens is the excess iron, because it's not excreted at a significant rate at all in the human body. There's some sources, there's some studies that suggest that you can actually lose iron from your sweat, and also the feces, but I'm talking absorbed iron. You can possibly remove a tiny bit in the sweat. However, it's nowhere near as significant as the excretion rate through the sweat as the amount that is likely to build up over time through fortified foods. It's something like 0.1% of your daily iron intake can be excreted through the sweat. So if you're taking in a large amount of iron on a regular basis, it's very likely to contribute towards. So basically what happens is the excess iron in the blood, or in the body in general, since it's not excreted efficiently, it gets stored in the organs. It can get stored in the liver, in the pancreas, in the heart, and obviously that can cause a wide variety of other problems. So a lot of the symptoms of iron overload, okay, and I'm talking specifically about iron overload, not a genetic predisposition to building up iron, hemochromatosis. Essentially, the main symptoms that you'll probably notice, and most people will notice from excess dietary iron, will be things like weakness, fatigue, lethargy, dizziness, and then your skin should change color as well. And if I'm not mistaken, too much iron can create a deficiency in copper. And so there's a possible mechanism between getting enough copper in the body and regulating the excess iron. There's also a wide variety of other protocols people have devised in order to chelate or chelate iron out of the body, to pull it out of the body. But nonetheless, further symptoms would be things like nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain. But typically you'll see these when they're building up in organs like the liver, and they're already at an advanced stage to where it's pathogenic, to the point that you better get medical help and phlebotomies, or you're likely going to die. So it's a very serious problem, and the storing of excess iron in various organ systems is what contributes towards diabetes, from damaging the pancreas, various heart disorders from storing the iron in the heart, and things like hepatitis and liver failure from storing the excess iron in the liver. And, you know, the biggest cause of concern is for men who don't shed blood every month through their monthly cycles. They're at extreme risk for iron overload since they don't have that regular bleeding. And men, of all people, who are consuming enough red meat should have zero problems getting enough iron from their diet from natural sources. And obviously things like beans and spinach have iron in them, but some of the plant compounds, what they call anti-nutrients, might interfere with that iron absorption to a certain extent. However, the fact of the matter is we shouldn't be putting this supplemental iron in the diet. And I made a video a while ago, I think back in 2017, about a popular YouTuber named Juji Mufu. Juji Mufu is a giant bodybuilder guy who does backflips and stretches and stuff for views. And basically, he was addicted to cream of wheat. That was like his favorite thing. And he had videos where he showed his daily routine where he'd be eating like 5 packets of cream of wheat per day. And there's a lot of supplemental iron in those. There's like 60% of your daily value of supplemental iron per packet. And he would eat like 4 packets at a time, multiple times a day. And so he was getting a lot of supplemental iron in his diet. Well, he developed all sorts of negative side effects, like his heart. He had a super enlarged heart, and he had, pain in his abdominal, fatigue, and lethargy. And when he went to the doctor, they found that his iron levels were through the roof, and he needed to get blood drawn, blood phlebotomies immediately. Doctor diagnosed him with a genetic predisposition to storing iron, hemochromatosis. The problem with that is that this guy was eating inhumane amounts of supplemental iron through cream of wheat. And like usual, doctors, they completely missed the cause and blame genetics. And so he thought, oh, it's because I was eating too much red meat. Well, little did the doctor and Juji Mufu know, Juji Mufu was consuming over 400% of the daily recommended intake of iron from cream of wheat from fortified cream of wheat alone. And his idea of the cause was too much red meat. So there's actually a rate limiting mechanism in the intestine for natural food sources, and this includes heme iron, contrary to popular belief, that prevents the absorption of excess iron from natural food sources when iron stores are adequate. Now, this rate limiting mechanism can be overcome through iron supplements. And so when you're eating the fortified iron, it is absorbed at an abnormal rate compared to the natural iron, which is why supplemental iron is much more of a concern than iron from whole foods. And it is true that iron from red meat absorbs completely differently than the iron from plant foods. Now, I will say, if you are concerned about red meat consumption and iron overload, the fact is there are thousands and thousands of people who eat all red meat diets and do not develop iron problems. In fact, well, they don't develop iron overload symptoms. In fact, there's a wide variety of people that I follow who had genetic hemochromatosis diagnosed by their doctor, and they found that when they adopted an all red meat diet, which I'm not advocating here, they no longer needed phlebotomies for some reason. They didn't have excess iron in their blood. Their iron levels were healthy without even needing phlebotomies, despite eating all that red meat. And so possibly that's because there's adequate levels of copper, and they're not just getting an abundance of, inhumane ratios of iron to copper. And there was a couple of cases where people had low iron for some reason, despite eating an all-meat diet. Now that's a weird case, but that just goes to show you that it's not as simple as red meat causes iron overload because of all the iron. It acts completely differently, the iron in natural foods compared to supplemental sources. And so if you don't want to end up like Juji Mufu, you should make sure the rice that you're consuming is not fortified. The bread you're eating is not fortified. And I don't eat any of that crap, and I recommend you cut out all those refined carbs completely, and reduce the overall amount of carbs you eat unless you're an athlete in general, simply because you don't really need that much carbohydrates to fuel. I mean, you don't even need carbs at all from dietary sources, but that I've already made other videos on, and it's a completely deep topic. So regardless of all that carbohydrate nonsense, point is, refined foods are killing our nation, and is killing our nation in ways that most people aren't even aware of. Iron overload. So leave your question in the comments down below, and I'll talk to y'all next time.